Okay, hi. So my name's Dave. Some of you met me in the podcasting session yesterday. I won't spend too long introducing myself because you can find out about me online. But I edit thenative.com, which is a hub of inspiring content for education, youth, marketers, social media managers, community managers, all that kind of stuff. It's part of Natives Group, which you may know as Net Natives, but we've rebranded, so I have to put the proper name out there now. Post one piece of content a day, one good piece of content a day. There's a weekly podcast, which I'm also the host of. There's a weekly newsletter. So we've got case studies, interviews, articles, guest posts, whatever. Go and have a read of it if you like. Sign up to a newsletter, even better. If you want to contribute at some point, then please do. I'm always on the lookout for contributors. So that's me. And yeah, I'm here to talk about content today. So you've probably all heard the phrase content is king. Certainly when I was applying for my previous job, leading on social media at University of Warwick, I used it in my interview quite a few times and it seemed to go okay. And I was curious about this phrase, the origins of it, because I've seen it a lot in relation to social media. So I did some research about where it came from, and it actually came from Bill Gates, who you've probably never seen dab before. He used this phrase in 1996 when he was talking about the internet. I should say hello, people on the internet, welcome. And he was talking about how important content is for the internet. And for me, it seems that people have sort of got away from that, particularly when it comes to social media, which is where I spend a lot of my time looking at interesting stuff. We've kind of got, in the last few years, we've got into the habit of really getting excited about the new tools and not necessarily thinking so much about what sort of content we use in those tools to put out there. And I can understand it, because you remember when Facebook Live first came out, Facebook was pushing it everywhere. You were getting notifications all the time that that friend you know from, well, not even that friend, that person you went to school with has gone live. It's like, I don't care. But the notifications were telling you so, and you were rewarded with massive reach for it. So people were doing things like going live and using Snapchat Spectacles just to get that reach and not really necessarily thinking about the content of it. But I'm always of the opinion that you should really think about what content you're putting out there. So in terms of why I wanted to focus on content in this session, obviously the fact that you can only do something new for the first time once, and you only get that perk in the newsfeed and that boost in the newsfeed the first time. But what's really interesting is the algorithms that control pretty much everything on the web now. The purpose of them is to serve you interesting, relevant, useful content. So if you're not thinking about what content you're putting out there and how it's going to meet the needs of your audience, you're going to struggle ultimately, and you're going to struggle to get your content seen, even if you've got a budget to promote it, which I know a lot of people don't have the luxury of having. And content as well for HE, it's a really great way of telling your story. I know when I worked at Warwick, we did a rebrand and we did some research into university brands to help inform that. One of the big things that came out of it was that if you're not known for something as a university, then people just don't really register that you exist. So Oxford and Cambridge, people know who they are because they're Oxford and Cambridge. People know some of the London universities because they're attached to London. And people know other universities for perhaps a particular subject or a particular alumni. But beyond that, if you're not telling your story, people just don't know you exist. And it's a really difficult challenge to get into people's minds. So what I wanted to do in this session really is go through and pick out. I spend a lot of my time looking at content and curating examples of content to share with a wider audience and finding interesting pieces and hopefully tracking down the people who are responsible for them and talking to them and finding out about where they got it from. And what I wanted to do with this session is just give you some examples of some content I think that we should be thinking about doing more of, some types of content that I think we could do better, and a few examples, because everybody likes fails, a few examples of things that we should not do so much of. So that's the plan. Lots of examples of stuff. I kind of feel like I'm piggybacking on the glory of other people, but this is my reading and passing it on to you as a room, so hopefully you'll find it interesting. So to start off, things you should be doing more of, and I've tried to include a range of things here that can allow for going from no budget to lots of budget. The first thing that I'm a big fan of is campus porn, which you can see on these first three images. And yes, I did say campus porn. That is a thing. Hashtag campus porn. You've probably all seen it. If any of you here are responsible for your institution's social media channels, you all know what I'm talking about when something happens, usually with the weather. So there's some form of weather that you can capture as an image. And you can combine that with one of your campus's buildings, and you post it on Instagram, and people will love it. They go mad for it. Cambridge are really good at doing campus porn. They've got very photogenic buildings, and being where they are in Cambridge, they get some quite spectacular sunsets. It's a great way of boosting engagement. And people might push back and say, well, it's really soft, it's really fluffy stuff. But when you dig into the comments on this sort of campus porn, it's hard to argue that point, because you've got alumni who maybe haven't looked at you for years and years saying, oh, I remember that. That brings back such happy memories. Or that's changed a lot since I was there. I'd love to see it sometime. You get current students going, doesn't my building look amazing? And you get prospective students going, wow, that looks cool. I'd like to live there. So it might feel like a cop-out. It might feel like a cheat. But campus porn, there's no need to be ashamed of it. We should all be doing more of it, I think. I even wrote an entire case study as to why we should be doing more campus porn, so do check that out if you want to find out more. I'm going to stop saying porn now. Actually, I'm not going to stop saying porn. You can do campus porn every single day, like the University of Manchester did in 2016. Again, not a groundbreaking idea, but really nicely done. So this was a photo a day project, and they crowdsourced it from their community. So they did it throughout 2016. You can find it on their Facebook page, and it literally tells the story of the university every single day of the year. And because it's contributions from the community as well, it builds that community side. Just a really great way of showcasing what your place actually looks like, what it might be like to live and study there. And again, it's not going to break the bank, and I know it's not a particularly groundbreaking idea, but when you do it well, it can be really effective. Another university who are very good at building community and getting people involved are Loughborough. If you've entered an award, you've probably been beaten by them, because they seem to win all of the awards. But rightly so. They are very, very good at pretty much everything they do. And the hashtag Loughborough Family stuff that they've done, the work they do around induction and clearing, around getting people excited to be going to Loughborough, it's reflected in their TEF results and the buy-in they get from their students. And you probably don't need me to list loads of examples of the Loughborough stuff, because if you're like I was when I was at Warwick, you've probably looked at them and thought, oh, damn you. Trying to keep my language good for the web stream. But yeah, Loughborough do all that kind of stuff really, really well. And if you want a go-to to have a look, then do go and see what they're up to. And just embracing you for being you. So these squirrels that are currently dancing on your screen, they're from Keele. So Keele University, big on squirrels. Like, imagine how many geese are here. Transfer that for squirrels, and that's what Keele's like. And they're not afraid of shying away from that fact. They did a admittedly slightly creepy Valentine's campaign a couple of years ago, where they sent Valentine's cards to offer holders featuring a picture of a person dressed as a squirrel, saying, I hope you're thinking of me. I certainly am now. Can't sleep. But what I love about Keele is that they embrace the fact that they've got a load of squirrels on their campus. They don't see them as these North American menace that's come over and moved all of our ginger natives north. They just embrace the fact that students like the squirrels, they can get some cool content from it. And again, it goes back to the campus porn stuff. The ultimate magical combination for campus porn is weather plus buildings plus animals. If you get that, your social media stats report for that month will just be through the roof. So if you've got an animal that you have a lot of on your campus, don't shy away from them. Unless, like at Warwick, you have racist geese, and then step away from them, because that's something you don't want to have to deal with. But embrace the things that make your campus you. It's a point of difference. It will make you stick out. It's far better to be remembered as being the campus with the squirrels than not being remembered at all. So next up, in terms of what we should do more of, social media takeovers. Again, a really simple idea, but so effective. Give the trust to your students to not screw up on your account, not do anything that would get you into trouble, and actually get that genuine point of view across. So this is a screen grab from a Snapchat takeover that Glasgow did last year, where they had a postgrad student traveling over from California. They just gave her the Snapchat account and just let her document her journey from America to Glasgow. And then what they didn't tell her was that they'd sorted out what flight she was coming in, and they met her at the airport. So the final scene was her being greeted by the Glasgow team. But really effective. And most of the time, the students you get involved in a takeover they're savvy. They know that these things leave a digital footprint. So chances are, and I can't say this for absolutely everyone, but chances are they won't do anything that will cause you bother other than create amazing content for you. So get your students involved, because however good at marketing you think you are, however good at expressing what life at your university is like in a way that is relevant to a young person, you're not as good as your students are at doing that. So just let them do it. And sort of piggybacking on from that, just user-generated content in general. And again, I know I'm not picking out an example that's particularly groundbreaking, and I know lots of universities do blogs, and this just happened to be one that caught my eye. But this example here of Plymouth postgraduate blogs, some people prefer to get their content in a written form. So have some blogs for your students to contribute and pay them for writing, because then they'll take it more seriously. And they'll create far better content for you. And then, boom, within a couple of months, you'll have a load of stuff that you can fill your prospectus with, you can link to on social media, you can put in your CRM, you can do a whole world of good stuff with. And you know, your students will be motivated to keep contributing stuff. And I know from being involved in previous student blogs, they're usually really keen to find out what you want them to write about as well. So if you're coming up with a campaign around societies, fire off an email to your student bloggers and you'll be faced with a load of blogs about how good your societies are. So it's a quick win for everyone, really. And the other example I've put up there is University of Chester's Instagram feed, which is entirely UGC. So it's not the biggest following in the world, but I really like the approach they're doing. So the idea is you contribute to this hashtag #MyChesterStory, and the university curates a feed based on that. So again, I don't want to say no filter, because some of the images probably do have filters on there, but it's that kind of idea. It's not come from a glossy university central marketing team. It's real life from real students using their real phones to capture what life is like at their campus, and then sharing it to a slightly wider audience. So user-generated content I'm a huge fan of, and would certainly advocate doing loads more of. I'm not going to talk too much about podcasting, because I will end up running over if you start getting me on podcasting. I did do an hour and a half of it yesterday. What I will say is podcasting is great. There's a massive opportunity in the sector for universities to be doing more with this medium. If you want all the resources from yesterday, including the audio that my select group of podcasting nerds made in the room right there and then yesterday, then go to this URL that's on the screen now. It's got all the slides from yesterday, loads of info about podcasts, and like I say, that bit of audio we made yesterday. But yeah, if you want to talk more about podcasting, then catch up with me afterwards, because I will talk on and on about it. But we should definitely be doing more of it. It's a brilliant medium for this sector. There's so much opportunity there that we're not using at the moment. But we're still at a point where there's plenty of opportunity for you actually to do something good and be ahead of the curve. Another thing I think we should be doing more of is explaining procedures and processes in a fun way. So I don't know how many of you saw this. This was a couple of weeks ago from Swansea, and it does have sound. It's I didn't want to play it because it's one of those sort of 8-bit retro, slightly annoying sounds. But they decided that students want to know about clearing. They want to know what the process is, but you can be quite dry explaining that in just a web page. So they decided to jump on the retro 8-bit theme and made this little video of how clearing actually works. So it's on their YouTube channel. Obviously it's running now. I probably won't go through the whole thing because I think it's about 4 minutes long. But just thinking differently about content that's going to be useful to anyone and everyone, regardless of whether they come to university. Again, it puts you out there as being known for something. It will make you stand out. And for things like clearing, students really want to know how it works because they're entering clearing much more openly now than they were a few years ago. They see it as an opportunity, not as a last resort. So if you can make it as easy as possible, then you're going to be rewarded for that. So having some creative thinking around it will really, really help. So this next one, this video does have sound, so I will shut up so you can hear it. But essentially I've put this in as an example of doing more of telling your story in a really snappy and effective way. So I'm just going to play the video because I think this is one of the best examples I've seen yet in the last couple of years of a higher ed institution telling its story in 2 minutes.
so flashy, bend over. Now she want drop the anchor. What?
So I hope you'll agree. I think that's a brilliant example of showing what your institution is like in less than 2 minutes. Certainly far more engaging than a prospectus might be. And yes, that kind of thing takes budget, but a lot of that is creativity and just knowing somebody who can do a nice edit for you. So think outside the box about how you present yourself. And I guess what I'm trying to make with a lot of this, the point I'm trying to make is, so much happens in the internet now, and this is a snapshot of what happens every minute on the internet. And I guess if you're putting content out there that makes people do this, then there's no point. You've got to stand out. You've got to do things that will capture people's imaginations. So be bold in your approach and think differently. So those are a few things I think we should do more of. Kind of following on from that, some things I think we should do better. Now the first one is press releases. So I used to be a press officer for a local council. I know why press releases exist, and I know how to write them. Problem is, I see far too many places, not just in the sector, across the web in general, that too many places that think that press releases and a news feed are like the same thing, and they think that posting a press release on their news feed will be of interest to the general public. Spoiler, it's not. Press releases are written for journalists. So, in my view, if something is important enough to put a press release out about it, then it's worth working a little bit harder and pulling together some interesting content around it and not just linking to a press release from your Twitter feed, because unless it's a story about rankings, and even then people are only going to read the headline anyway and click like because your university is in the top whatever of this week's particular ranking, people aren't really going to read a press release. So this was a rant from 2006 where somebody wanted the press release to die. And despite the headline, it was actually more about, we need to make press releases more useful for the changing industry. So this was a call for actually creating audio, sending video, sending images, making people accessible so that journalists didn't have to work so hard to find the story in there and to find assets around it, because newsrooms are being stripped back and they can't come and send a photographer, they can't come and send somebody to record an interview. But this got me thinking and thinking about how the idea of it's worth us creating content around stuff that we're sending a press release out about. So my favorite example of this is from Harvard. I'll show it you in a second. So they came to their point of the year where they were announcing who their guest speaker was going to be at their graduation ceremonies, and they put out a press release, because obviously it still has its uses. But instead of linking to the press release on their Facebook page, they made a custom video for it. This was in 2016. And they did it in a quite creative way, and this is what they did. So the point I was making was that they did a brilliant video and they didn't even tell you who the special guest was. It was done as a teaser. Out of interest, can anyone guess who it might have been? Yes, it was. A few people guessed John Williams because of the music, and that's just happy coincidence that they seem to work together. But think about that. Instead of just putting a press release out saying Steven Spielberg's going to be our guest, make it more engaging, make it more interactive. This went through the roof for them on Facebook, and they got loads of interactions, and it really changed their approach to things like that, and gave them a reason to think about what sort of content they're creating when they're doing a press release. Another thing I think we should do more of is get more of our faces into our social media feeds. So the Humans of York, which is obviously a campaign from this very university, piggybacking on the Humans of New York idea and just putting some faces of your community out there. And similar things, 52 Faces of Bristol, which was done over a course of a year from 2014 to 2015, a different person each week. Nice photography, nice bit of written content to go with it. Really interesting stuff. It humanises your organisation, which is something we should all be trying to do. And the scientist selfies stuff, really great as well. And this particularly came into play when that strange academic made that even stranger comment about women scientists falling in love with him all the time, and there was a bit of a backlash. It's just great when movements like that come around and you get to see what scientists look like, for example, and it's just really fun. So get more faces into your feeds. And another thing I think we should do more of is more creative copywriting and bolder layouts and things like this. So this is taken from University of Warwick's postgraduate, it's not a prospectus as such, it's more like a magazine, a lookbook almost. And where this comes from is that they did some customer persona work among their PG audience. And they found out that one of the big motivating factors for postgraduate students choosing Warwick was that they liked the academic challenge. They liked the fact that they were being stretched and they were being made uncomfortable. So to tease that out, they put those words in giant letters, got one of the academics, made her look incredibly uncomfortable, stripped it back to black and white to make it look even edgier as well, and put that as a centerfold in a PG spread. And I think it's really effective, and it's quite a bold way of combining words and images to really draw your eye in and create a strong effect. But, there's going to be people up and down the land working in comms and marketing teams across our institutions that can do this, has this natural creativity with words and natural ability to create something brilliant. So make use of those. Have fun with words. Language is a thing that you can play with, and you can get really great results when you do play with it. So, next up is, I can't remember. Yes, I can now. So, this is, I've put this in there as an example of using features on social media platforms, but using them more creatively. So this is something Aston did in clearing last year. So doing a Snapchat filter, yeah, fine, that's a good idea, yeah. We've probably all at least wanted to do that, but perhaps not had the budget for it. What Aston did last year on Results Day, ahead of Results Day, they set up hundreds of personalised geo-filters set in a geofence around the home address of students who they knew were going to be opening their results and finding out they were coming to Aston. Ready and waiting for them on that Thursday morning. Also on that Thursday, they got something through the post from the university saying, congratulations on your results and securing your place at Aston. Jump onto Snapchat and check out the filter we've made for you and share it using our hashtag. So they made a bunch of these filters that people could go on just for them, personalised for them, saying, look, I'm on my way to Aston, and they were sharing it across social media. And it was a great, in terms of a first impression on social media, how welcoming is that? It's not just a kind of friendly video or a nice message from the VC. It's a filter with your name on it, specifically made just for you, fenced around your house, so you don't even have to get out of bed to use it. And it just made a brilliant first impression and really kick-started this Hello Aston Uni campaign, which was all about making campus welcome and accessible in those awkward weeks between results day and arrivals weekend, where you've got a bunch of students who are part of the university but aren't really part yet because they haven't arrived yet. Use these digital technologies to make them feel like they're already on campus and let them make friends and make connections ahead of coming here. It just makes that transition into actually being here far more easy for them. Another thing you probably saw, it came out in clearing last year, is Lise Beckett's use of Becky, the chatbot, for assigning places and dishing out courses. Again, just making use of this technology that's available. And I know chatbots are perhaps a slightly more hesitant area given we've had GDPR stuff, but there's still opportunities there to do some interesting stuff. So if you didn't see the Leeds Beckett stuff, it's well worth reading about the very interesting case study. And just doing more of making your open days and your UCAS fairs really fun. So University of Gloucestershire do like green screen stuff as one of their courses. I don't think that's a technical term for it, but I don't know the official word. But basically they had somebody who did their degree and ended up working on the Harry Potter films. So they capitalised on that. Again, like the squirrels at Keele, they made the most of something that was relevant to them. And for their open day stand, they set up a green screen. So there was a broomstick in front of the green screen, got people to pose on the broomstick, and then said, go and check out our Facebook page afterwards. And they were there in full Harry Potter regalia. So again, you're going to remember that university. So just being creative about what you can do on those different events. Another thing in terms of doing better, I think as a sector, we've still got some way to go in terms of putting thought-provoking and challenging content out there. And we can take inspiration from what some of the bigger brands are doing. And there's loads of examples you could pull from this, but one I really liked was what Google did for International Women's Day this year. And I think this is the kind of content that universities could do wonderfully. If perhaps we just had the not so much the inclination, but just the boldness to just go for it and create something. So creating something that's thought-provoking and challenging, like this from Google. Okay, so yeah, I love that as a piece of content from Google, and I think as a spark of inspiration for what many people in this room could create from your institutions, I think it's definitely something to look at. Okay, so you're probably wondering why I've now got the Twitter feed of a lawnmower company up on screen. It's a very good question. Dennis Mowers are one of my favourite Twitter accounts. And I've put them on here because they're really good at telling their story. They're really good at putting content out there that makes me, somebody who is not, as you will have noticed, not a groundsman at a football ground or a bowling club, but I'm really interested to find out more about their world. So they do stuff like Guess the Ground trivia, Preston North End, in case you were wondering. But they've got to the point now where they're so good at telling their story that they'll be live tweeting from their equivalent at this sort of conference, and I'm kind of wishing I was there. So if you want to see someone who you might think would be really dull and not have a good story to tell, do Twitter really well, look at Dennis Mowers, they're really good. And this is in stark contrast to my football team, Aston Villa, who put out horrendous social media content. So just some examples we've got here. So the one on the left, you're the owner of the team that is not our team. Is far more successful than our team has ever been. Let us know some comments because our social media manager needs to boost his engagement stats this month. I don't care. The middle one, Tom Hanks once made the mistake of saying he supports Aston Villa. You can see by the look in his face, he's like, this has gone too far, I'm holding a scarf. All I said was it sounded like a nice Roman name and now the club won't stop badgering me, please leave me alone. So they did that. I replied to that hashtag and said, hashtag tomorrow we'll probably lose to Nottingham Forest Gump. They didn't retweet me, so they can jog on as far as I'm concerned. And the one on the right, some player who's got no connection to our team whatsoever is starting some career that's nothing to do with the sport we play whatsoever. But could our famous bearded guy from Sweden, could he beat him up? Let us know in the comments. No, don't do that. It's really terrible content. Don't do cheap stuff like that, particularly when once on a Thursday night in February last year, they put out this really interesting article about their stadium that they buried on a Thursday night that I happened to read because I was online. They've never tweeted about it since. It's the best piece of content they've ever put on there. They never did anything with it. And it just makes me really frustrated. So make use of these technologies to tell your story effectively. Don't just do it for cheap engagement, because ultimately the algorithms will start punishing you for that and people won't care. So it won't surprise you to know that I think we should be doing video better. Everyone probably says you should do video. But it's thinking about video that's appropriate for the platform. So another example from Harvard here. They had an academic who broke the world record for building for a distance flown by a paper aeroplane. They did some comms around that. And sure, the interview with the academic's fine, but what do most people want to know? They want to know what the plane looks like so they can have a go and try and break the world record. So they did this video in the style of the recipe videos that were becoming very popular on Facebook and Instagram at the time. And they put this out there as a bit of a test. And it hit like 500,000 views within a couple of weeks. And it's really changed their approach to video on Facebook and Instagram. So it's about not just doing good video, but making your video most appropriate for the platforms you're sharing it on and making it entertaining. They still did the talking heads piece for YouTube on this. But as I say, the masses want to know what the paper airplane looks like. And another thing we can do better is having some character in our social feeds. So if you've ever looked at Tesco Mobile's Twitter feed, it's really funny. They're really good at taking people down. My particular favourite is "O2 are better, sorry," and they reply with "Don't apologise for your poor judgment." Brilliant. They've got great character, and I'm not necessarily saying that our institutions all need to be quite to this level all the time, but we can take inspiration from it. And weirdly, university libraries are really good at having this character. So Liverpool University, note in the bio, we don't control the heating. It's that important to them that they've had to put it in their bio. But yeah, that one that says fire in capital letters, they tweeted that when the fire alarm went off. That's probably not what you'd expect from a library. And then the trail as you go through, the idea of the fire alarm is that you leave the building. And I particularly like they only use fire exits if there is a fire, all of that kind of stuff. But again, they're really good at using these spaces to build a character and build community. And aside from clearing, most of our corporate accounts are not. We kind of have results day where everyone suddenly lets their hair down and everyone is suddenly this cool, welcoming place where we're really with it. We're using all the hottest memes, we're using GIFs galore, we're using emojis all over the place. And then we go back to being like polite, professional, slightly boring social media stuff. Have a bit more character all year round. I know this has already been highlighted yesterday, but stuff like this has an impact. I still find it amazing that people generally got offended by the use of the words "jog on," but I think there's a really effective use of social media to get this response out there. So just having a bit of character is really, really valuable in this space. So just the last couple of slides before I finish, just some things that I think you should kill off. Now, I have anonymized these because much as I'd like to tell you who they are, I think it would be slightly naughty to do so. Don't do stuff like this. A university genuinely did this. What's the greatest pot noodle flavour of all time? Who really cares? But they did this at the time that the reactions came in on Facebook, so they clearly couldn't think of anything worth setting up a reaction poll for around their university, so did it around pot noodles instead. And of course, frustratingly, it got 14,000 engagements, so the next day they brought out 4 more flavours that they did a vote on, and surprisingly the algorithm went, "You're just trying to do the same as yesterday, we're not going to show that to anybody." It's unlucky. So don't do stuff like that. And if you're going to use social media, then use the platforms properly. Don't just hook one up to the other, because if you hook Facebook up to Twitter, you get this rubbish look where it cuts off halfway through and does some weird link that takes you out of Twitter. It's a really bad user experience. The one underneath is a much better example, like tagging other accounts and stuff. The weird thing with this is the same Twitter account, so they know how to tweet properly. They're just very unfortunately pulling things from Facebook. Because this is really bad on Facebook. If you just share something on Facebook with no comment, all you get is the weird Facebook link onto Twitter with no context whatsoever, and it just looks like you've been hacked. So don't do that. Don't post the same content absolutely everywhere. That's just really lazy, and it doesn't give any reason for people to follow you across different channels. Take the same chunk of content and repurpose it for different channels. Sure, do that, but don't just post this. Don't post once and share everywhere. We're long past doing that. Don't just use social media for broadcasting either. the clue's in the title, it's social media. It's built around conversation. The whole point of social media and why it's done so well in the last 10 years is that it's technology allowing humans to connect with other humans. So ask questions, because you get really interesting answers when you ask questions. So like Newcastle University last summer, they always said, we're always looking to make our Twitter game stronger. What would you like to see us post more of this account? Videos about research, not so much. Dank memes, oh yeah, lots of dank memes, please. Campus porn getting a little look in at the top as well there. So they wouldn't have known that if they hadn't have asked the question. And likewise, accommodation at University of Kent, I loved this last summer. This was so good. I'm sure it would change this year. It would probably be Harry Kane or Gareth Southgate or something. But they asked a question about what this hedgehog should be called, and it got named Corbyn, slightly followed by Harambe Hog McHarambe Face. But again, if they'd have just approached social media in a broadcast way, they'd have never got that kind of stuff. And I think this is great. So ask questions. You might be surprised at what people come back with. And don't just approach digital channels without some kind of idea of why you're doing it and where you're going. And if somebody comes at you saying, we need a Twitter account or we need a web page, send them this GIF until they can give you a proper reply. And if they can't, then they're not allowed one. So yeah, those are the things we should kill off. So just as a quick way of rounding up, because I know I'm just about out of time. For me, content is still king and should still be king. And we just need to remember that. Good content will be rewarded by the algorithms. Good content will be rewarded in the trust and loyalty from your audience. And if you can offer things that you know your audience will find useful and or interesting and or entertaining, then they're going to come back for more, and they're going to be interested in what you have to say. So I guess ultimately, as a way of rounding it back to my original title, just don't be content with just putting stuff out there for cheap likes. Don't be content with putting stuff out there with no idea around it, and don't be content with creating average content. So that's it from me. I think there are time for a couple of questions. I do have to shoot off fairly soon after this because I've got an important game of touch rugby to play tonight. But if you want to get me on Twitter or LinkedIn or email, then please do get in touch. I have no idea if that's real or not. I hope it's not, because otherwise that deer is probably dead. Right at the back.
Thank you very much. Run, Brian, run. Who was it suggested we should try and make Brian run as far as possible with the microphone? I think it's working.
Hi Dave, I'm Keith MacDonald from University of London / Greenwich. Sorry for those who are following on Twitter, I'm slightly repeating myself. I thought the recommendations have been brilliant. I think there's a point at which we might realise that a lot of HE institutions are quite risk averse, and we're concerned about how we can persuade them to, or be brave enough to let us create good content. I was just wondering if you had any sort of recommendations of how we may approach managers to be more risky, to be more creative, and to try and get those sort of conversions and good content through.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it is a really difficult challenge. I mean, I know people in the sector who adopt the approach of it being easier to do it and ask for forgiveness rather than to ask for permission. I think if you adopt that approach, you need obviously some good content, and you need a really solid report and analysis of this is why I did it, this is what we did, this is what happened, and this is what we can do as a result of it. That's one way of doing it. It sounds cynical, but another way is tap into their jealousy and tap into their competitive nature. So if you see a bit of content from one of your competitors that you think is really good, show it to them and say, we should be doing that. Like that's been really effective for them. Why aren't we doing stuff like this? We could do this, and if you can cost something out as a rough idea of resources or time as well, then that can be really effective as well. I think with any of these kind of things, if you can go to somebody with a really strong argument of like, this is what I want to do, and this is why, and this is how I think we can do it, then people are going to, if you've thought through with that and you're confident enough in yourself and your ideas, then people are going to find it hard to argue with. So it's really putting yourself in a position where you're as prepared as you can be to pitch your idea and having the confidence in your idea, because it's going to be a good idea. You know your audience, you know your channels, and it's often just presenting it in the right way. But then, like I say, also having some examples of what your competitors are doing that will make them jealous as well can be really, really helpful. Sign up to my newsletter. I send out stuff every week. Cheap plug.
Any more questions? No? Oh, yep, one there.
Lindsay Powell-Jones from Cardiff University. I wondered if you'd ever created any content for Reddit.
Reddit's a really interesting space that I do not understand at all. It's on my list of things that I'm trying to get some case studies for my podcast. I know of a couple of universities that have been doing it really effectively. So Imperial College have been doing a lot of stuff recently. You could speak to those guys, 'cause I know they've been doing a few Ask Me Anythings. And the Heroes of the Hour, Reading, have done a lot on Reddit as well. So Tim Watkins, who's their social media manager, he uses Reddit in his own time anyway, so he really understands that space. And he did a talk at a case conference last year where he was talking about how it wasn't an official talk, it was like an unconference talk, but he was talking about how they use Reddit to engage their academics. It's a fascinating space because you can tap into such engaged niche audiences that will really care about the fact that you've got a leading academic in that field. But I know there are certain boxes you need to be able to tick among the Reddit community to do an official Ask Me Anything and stuff like that. But I would advise checking in with Reading and Imperial, because they are ones that I know that do it well. And again, it's going to sound like another cheap plug, but Imperial are writing something up for the Native for me about Reddit, which should go live in a couple of weeks as well. So hopefully there'll be something there coming up. It's kind of one of those things that I don't know enough about and I know I need to know more of, but it's a really great space to look at, definitely. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just conferring. Thank you very much, Dave.
You're welcome.